It's a very good morning and you're watching State of the Nation, brought to you by Zimpaper's TV network live from Harare. In part 4 of our series, NPRC Visibility and Awareness Campaign, we will be focusing on Healing, Rehabilitation and Reconciliation Thematic Committee. The National Peace and Reconciliation Commission is mandated to receive and investigate complaints from the public in instances where conflicts arise as a result of human rights violations as provided for in the Constitution and the NPRC Act. Citizens have the constitutional right to approach the NPRC to lodge complaints. And joining us today to discuss this and more is Commissioner Leslie Ncube. Commissioner, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Christian.
Now, of course, if you have any comments or views on our show today, please connect with us via our Facebook page, Zimpaper's TV network, or our Twitter handle @ZTN News. Now, Commissioner, your thematic committee works closely with the complaints handling and investigations, as well as the victim support, gender and diversity thematic committees. Please tell us how these committees gel together and work hand in glove through their structures to function.
Thank you, Christian. Firstly, I would like to say, in terms of the work of the Commission, all various thematic areas work hand in glove with one another. And I would like to start to say, when the complaints handling and investigations departments actually goes and does statement taking, the whole process is to fit into the relevant departments of the Commission. And assess it in terms of the Commission's framework and to see exactly where that particular issue can actually be, which particular thematic area can actually deal with the issue. For example, the investigations department should actually lead the processes of the Commission and also verify and authenticate if perhaps a violation did transpire. And then when the Commission sits, we'll then actually focus and say which is the best committee to deal with this particular issue. So it informs processes, and when it comes to the VSGD department, we are dealing with victims, and as a Commission we are clear in terms of the fact that we are victim-centered, and we want to customize all processes that enable victims to reach their full potential, for victims to get healed. And we have to make sure that we have qualified people at the level of the victim support unit to ensure that people are counseled and are emotionally upright at the end of the day.
Now, one of your major programs, of course, is dealing with the past strategy. May you please tell us a bit more about that?
Dealing with the past involves quite lots of issues. It's quite an expansive topic. I mean, I'll start by saying that each and every country has undergone its past. And here in Zimbabwe, we have our own past dating to the liberation struggle and also post-independence. And you'll realize that as a country, we've gone for quite a long time without addressing issues. We'll say the comrades who actually took up arms during the struggle, when they came back into the country in 1980, you'll realize that the majority of them did not go through the DDR, the disarmament, demobilization and reintegration processes. And those processes are quite important to ensure that they are demobilized and integrated into a community so that they live harmoniously. And the demobilization, they now distinguish themselves as civilians and also part of the communities. And we did not have quite a well-knitted process for that. And post-independence, just like any country that was at its teething level, we also had a fair share of our own problems where we experienced disturbances, and popularly known as the Kukuraundi discourse. And quite lots of issues came up. We had the Mramba Tswina, we had also the ESAP issues and so on, and leading to food riots and so on. So you would realize that as a country we've gone through various epochs of conflict, and what is important to us is how then we resolve these epochs. So dealing with the past is quite a central issue within the Commission. Intellectuals will always say to be ignorant of your history is to be intellectually defenseless. So it is quite important for us to understand the future by also investigating the past.
Of course. Now, you have mentioned that you're dealing with not just present conflict, but pre-colonial conflict. You're dealing with post-independence conflict as well. What specific programs have you developed to ensure that we have national healing as a country, as well as unity and cohesion?
Yes. In fact, our processes have been consultative in nature. They are people-driven, they are people-centered. And we find it quite important for us as a commission to ensure that we consult all stakeholders from grassroots levels, we consult the chiefs who happen to be the custodian, and various stakeholders who are also into the peace-building architecture. As a commission, we've been in office for about 4 years, but we should firstly acknowledge that there are other partners who've been doing this peace work for the past 10 or 15 years. And it is important to also understand what they have done. And to us as a commission, we find it important to say, gather their views and come up with a framework. For this particular instance, as a commission, we have a strategic plan that was actually endorsed by the various stakeholders. They inputted, and we had to make sure that the process of our strategic plan document had a buy-in from entirely everyone, says that when we move together as Zimbabweans, we are most likely to find common grounds.
Okay. Now, you have mentioned that obviously the success of the nation's healing is not independent to just NPRC facilitating. You've got various stakeholders involved. Would you be able to tell us who some of these stakeholders are and how they have worked with the Commission and particularly your thematic committee to make this happen?
Government becomes one of our key stakeholders. You'll realize that as a commission, we make our recommendations to government. And we've done our groundwork in terms of the buy-in politically. You'll realize that for us to move into communities, for us to engage into communities, because the recommendations that we make and the interventions that we make are processes that will also assist government in terms of once there is cohesion amongst communities, our government is also, it's a win-win situation. So I would say, as a commission, we engage various stakeholders who have been into the peace building field. There are quite a lot of them, and perhaps I wouldn't actually mention, but there are quite lots of them that have actually been in the peace building architecture. And to us, these thematic committees that we have, they fit into these processes. And we find it important that at the end of the day, the tenure of the commission will come to an end, but the peace building process continues. So it is important for us to ensure that we synergize at all processes and we empower communities in a very sustainable manner.
Now, you've mentioned that government is a stakeholder in the Commission's success and efforts. Does this not put you in a position where your impartiality is concerned when conflicts involving government is raised?
Thank you. We should understand firstly the constitution of the land, that we are a constitutional commission. It does not mean that when we are an independent commission, we work in isolation with government. People should also understand it from the Banjul Declaration that commissions, to a larger extent, are enabled by the government. Yes, we may receive funding from various stakeholders, but it is also the mandate of government centrally to ensure that commissions are enabled in terms of their operational framework. And it is also important that one of our 10 functions of the commission is to ensure that we recommend to government in terms of policy reforms and so on. And we will actually engage the executive at the level of the president, at the level of the vice president, and we find that actually important. For example, if we realize that people perhaps in Matapeleland are saying they do not have access to documentation, it will be important to also engage the vice president, and the vice president responsible, Mohati, will also perhaps engage as well the Registrar General. So we should also understand that whilst we're talking of the issue of independence, yes, we are saying we are independent as a commission, but we work harmoniously with government at the same time.
Now, one of your main functions as the Healing, Reconciliation and Rehabilitation Thematic Committee is to develop programs that ensure victims receive the necessary rehabilitative treatment and support. Please tell us about some of the programs that you have developed in this regard.
Yes. I would want to start with the healing process now. You know, healing is an emotional process. And I want to say, as part of the functions of the commission, to ensure that the truth-telling process, people have an opportunity to tell the truth about the past. One would say, when I hear the truth about what transpired, I'm in a better position of healing. So look, we are encouraging those who want to come and actually tell the truth. And during our hearing processes that we are preparing for, both the private and public hearings, this is one of the issues that will also be coming out. It will be the truth of what happened in the past, and one wants to understand why did it happen. And at the same time, we have those who are trained in terms of rehabilitative mechanisms of ensuring that one is actually rehabilitated in a manner that they become emotionally healthy and they are empowered to face the future.
You mentioned truth-telling as a key component to healing. Do you feel that truth-telling is feasible without opening old wounds and maybe reigniting conflict?
As a commission, firstly, I would want to say that we want to ensure that we engage, people engage, and we do not want to ignite new conflicts. And in that process, we have developed processes, especially in terms of the hearings. There are those hearings that are going to be public. There are also hearings that are also going to be private hearings. And we also want to ensure that the kind of hearings that are going to be done are hearings that do not ignite. Because peace building is a process. And as a process, it should be a process in terms of our vision and mission statement as an institution is to ensure that we have a peaceful generation going forward.
Would you have any particular cases that you could tell us about that resulted in the provision of reconciliation and rehabilitation with particular emphasis on justice for the affected?
Yes, there are quite a number of them. I would say we dealt with the San community. You know, the San community have always felt that they are not actually part and parcel of us as a country.
They feel like neglected.
They felt like they are neglected. When it comes to issues of development, they actually came to us and said, look, we do not even have a chief, and so on. And we have taken it up with the relevant ministry as well, to say the Ministry of Local Government that is actually dealing with issues of chieftainship and so on, to say, why don't you also consider actually the issue of a headman or a chief for this particular community, because they have also got special needs. So the whole idea is to harmonize them, because they will feel that, look, the way we are received by a particular community, we are not part and parcel of them. We are hunters and gatherers. And look at the situation that we're in as a country right now. You'd realize that absolutely, entirely everyone has absolutely not care for that kind of minority group. And we feel strongly that they have to be heard. And in terms of the responses that have come in, I've seen developmental initiative, drilling of boreholes now transpiring within the San communities, and also food handouts, also them receiving food handouts. And above all, in the processes, we value their culture and their cultural dynamics in terms of their intervention processes.
Now, of course, conflict can't always be just on paper or just neglect, as you have illustrated with the San communities. We have in the past conflicts that have been physical, and as such, they are persons who've been subjected to torture and other forms of abuse that are inclusive of amputation. How have you helped these people?
Well, I would want to cite perhaps in terms of our consultative processes that we've done, you would realize that each and every province in Zimbabwe has its own dynamics. You start with the Manicaland province. They will always tell you that, look, we have natural resources, God endowed natural resources, diamonds, but we've never benefited from the diamonds in Manicaland. And it is also important for us to also engage also with the executive in terms of policy reforms, to say, look, if a mineral resource is found in a particular province, to a larger extent, the beneficiation and the processing of that resource should also benefit the particular community, whether it's issues of employment and so on. So you realize that the quota system also in terms of employment should also kick in. And looking at the dynamics of the provinces, you move into the Matabeleland provinces as well. They will actually tell you about issues of marginalization. They will also tell you about issues of the past disturbances. And we also engage on that particular note to say, from the disturbances that were experienced in 1983 to 1987 upon the signing of the Unity Accord, perhaps the constituency actually lost perhaps about 10 years of development. So we make the required recommendations, and we find it important also to say in the devolution processes, because we now have also ministers of state responsible for responsible for devolution, to say the kind of development that should focus in the respective provinces should be the kind of development that actually addresses the concerns of that particular constituency. And they should take up the initiative. So this is what we are also coming up as a commission. And also in terms of the disturbances, also perhaps we are focusing on issues of developmental challenges, because when there are disturbances, you will realize that in any environment where there is conflict, there is no development. So peace is actually key towards economic growth. So in this particular instance, we are also engaging in terms of saying that the development that perhaps was transpiring in the other province should level up with the development in the Matabeleland provinces. So this is the other item, especially in the provinces of Matabeleland South, Bulawayo, Matabeleland North, and so on.
Would you say that, since you are, by the way, the commissioner responsible for Matabeleland North, Matabeleland South, and Bulawayo, would you say you have seen the execution of this devolution as you have mentioned?
I think at this point in time to evaluate, because development is an ongoing process, and we are almost about 3 years ever since the inception of the Ministers of State responsible for devolution, or the devolution agenda coming into the framework. So I would say perhaps we are also at its infancy stage, but what I have realized is that there is so much funding that is also being channeled towards the devolution processes. And to us, it is to advocate in terms of policy, but we are not really into the micromanaging of what the development is all about. But we believe the various constituencies also in the Matabeleland, they have got local authorities, the respective local authorities and the respective councillors who then champion this kind of agenda. But us is to recommend at that policy level.
So would you say this plays in with the awareness campaign of leaving no one behind?
Oh yes, in fact, as a commission, we have a holistic approach. We believe to a larger extent that we have even done one big mistake as a country of even naming province in terms of ethnicity.
I don't think many people realize that.
Yeah, of even naming provinces in terms of ethnicity. And you'll realize that perhaps if we were to just look at our next door neighbor, South Africa, where there is Mpumalanga province, perhaps Western province and so on, Gauteng province and so on. You know, in terms of the past that we have gone through, and also having elaborately our provinces are more of actually being grounded in terms of ethnicity. With time, I know perhaps we would level up, but it is important for us as Zimbabweans to rise above that, to rise above those issues that quite divide us, because I would say there is no one who will come and solve our problems as Zimbabweans. You call an outsider, they may actually even worsen the process. But it is important for us as Zimbabweans, you would realize that there are lots of intermarriages that have transpired. And it is important for us to come together in a holistic manner and try and actually address that kind of issue, not in an emotional manner, but in a very sober and well-defined manner to say, where are we heading to as a country? So I feel strongly that also in terms of the healing processes, because one will say, I have ownership, I'm from the Matabeleland province. The other one will say, I also own Mashonaland West, I also own Mashonaland Central. Yes. And these kind of divisions that we are now seeing or reflecting in terms of ethnicity will not build us as a country. They will further divide us, and the net effect that we are creating is a divided generation for even our own children and for future generations to come. So we really need to really think tough to say, what future, what is it in terms of planning that we are coming up with that will actually ensure cohesion amongst the various tribes or the various ethnicities? Because I think one mistake that is now happening in this country, before you even talk to someone, Christine, one wants to understand, Christine, unovakupi?
Yes. Yes.
They don't want to view you as a Zimbabwean. But if we were to cross over and find each other in UK, we view each other as Zimbabweans. We fly in home. Christine is Shona, Leslie is Ndebele. So we really need to find a framework that actually integrates us.
Of course. Now, you speak of ethnic integration and as a key element in us achieving national healing and cohesion. Would you say you have seen this develop or grow? Does it have a potential to be something that is adopted nationwide for generations to come?
In terms of the recommendations that we make, these are some of the recommendations that we also shall be fitting to the executive as well. To say, if we are to create sustainable peace in this country, we need to also ensure that we come up with a broad-based approach, where even when it comes to positions of responsibility and so on, that there is fairness. Because I would say one of the challenges, we know that our economy is also having a fair share of challenges. And when the economy is having a fair share of challenges, people come to introspect quite a lot. So we really need to also focus in terms of economic growth, because issues of economic growth also bring quite lots of conflict, inequalities. So whether in terms of resources and so on. So really the issue of healing, you would realize that, I'll give a good example of Matabeleland North. When we had our consultative processes in Matabeleland North, they were saying, look, we've got the Victoria Falls. We can't even afford to go and see the falls. We're endowed with coal. We have timber. But the people who are actually harvesting these products, they are not even actually giving a beneficiation to the what? To the communities. The central processing unit of Lupane Timber perhaps is housed in Harare. And it would have been important that process to have actually been done at the province, so that it actually creates even the job opportunities for the locals in that particular sphere. So those are issues that are doable, and I think they're actually quite feasible. all we need to do is develop listening skills, because as a peace builder, you have to have listening skills. Take time to analyze. Don't be rushing processes, because in the process, you do not want to create harm.
Yes. And on that note, we're going to quickly take a few minutes break. You're watching State of the Nation, and today we're discussing, along other things, the NPRC Visibility and Awareness Campaign with Commissioner Leslie Ncube. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're still watching State of the Nation, and today we're talking to Commissioner Leslie Ncube, who is chairman of the NPRC's, Commissioner Leslie Ncube, who is chairperson of the NPRC's thematic committee, which deals with healing, reconciliation, and rehabilitation. Now, Commissioner, before we went to break, you were telling us about how your strategy would have to start with ethnic disintegration. No, sorry, not disintegration, integration of all communities, ethnic backgrounds. And of course, on this basis, you have experienced some challenges with organizations and individuals who feel that the NPRC does not really have the sentiments of the locals in such situations at heart. Would you comment on that?
Yes, we have. But look, if you are well refined and well processed into the peace building architecture, such hurdles are expected. But what is important is how you deal with that particular situation moving forward. We've had quite a number of organizations, perhaps outside in Matepeleland, who had so much suspicion about the organization, and these are the democracies of this world. In terms of their thinking. But what is important to us as a tool is the tool of engagement. We've engaged these organizations, we've engaged them quite robustly. And I would say, like, from the inception we started the processes, I mean, we can actually sit on the table and dialogue harmoniously. You'll realize that, Christine, at one point when we started the consultative processes, there were lots of spanners. I mean, tables being kicked upside down, but I mean, that is expected. For 37 years in this country, people had never talked about their past. And you cannot expect people all of a sudden to actually what? To find the agenda quite harmoniously. So look, it is, you start from that kind of, you know, from the extreme ends, and finally you actually close in the gap. And the fact that they also contributed to our strategic plan processes is that the document, they have it, they have inputted into that document. And to us, what is important is the consensus building process, where the position that is taken by the majority of the institutions in terms of guiding the process. So we find it important, and we will say thumbs up to the Commission in terms of engaging these particular constituencies. And at this point in time, we can say we can engage Mtwagazi, we can engage all progressive forces. And we are saying in our lifetime, we have to make a difference.
How have your engagement attempts been accepted by these communities, particularly as they are so untrusting of a commission that they felt or was not representing their concerns?
Trust is something that you earn over time. And I'm saying at this point in time, we've been able to get that kind of trust. And as we move as a team, especially they actually comprise, they're actually part and parcel of these committees, like the healing, reconciliation, and rehabilitation. They also fit into that particular process as well. So they sit in that particular process, in that particular committee, and ensure that all their concerns are taken on board. And I would say that peace building is a process, and it is not a one-day's event. It actually needs somebody who's steadfast, somebody with listening skills, and somebody who's in a position of engaging. Even today, if I come to your office, you say no, but I'll keep knocking at your office until what? Until
you say
yes. You
yes.
actually give me your ear.
So, of course, part of your consultative processes included outreach programs, which, from my understanding, are going to lead to public hearings. Would you be able to differentiate between the two? What's the difference between your outreach program and how it translates to public hearings?
Well, I'll say in terms of the outreach processes, they are always ongoing. Outreach processes, I mean, we can always get to communities using the various thematic desks or thematic areas like, say, the VSGD, those who need counseling, outreaches in terms of conducting investigations, the CPMRT, and so on. But now when it moves to the issues of hearing, it's a well-defined process that is clearly done during laid-down procedures. And these processes have to be advertised on time. And when the public comes in, it is also a process of ensuring that communities heal. Because some of the problems that may be there, they may be on an individual basis, they also be on a group challenges that people have gone through. And when they bring them before the commission in terms of hearing, we are saying we will then have upped up the game to say, look, we want to find a sustainable solution for a particular problem. We listen to that particular person, what they are feeling, and we also would ask them to recommend what they feel will be best for them to heal, such that we customize a solution based on their particular submissions. It is not the commission that will then start and sit and then say, look, Christine is saying my problem is this, and Christine needs that. But we are advised by a particular individual, this the victim themselves. This is why we always say we are victim-centered as a commission.
Okay, now with regards to the public hearings, when likely will the commission start on these?
Look, it's quite a process, and we are doing the behind-the-scenes preparations, which are quite extensive. And we have to make sure that all the architecture, we have the peace committees that will also assist us. We have quite a lot. And you'll realize, let me cite an example and say, assuming you are doing a public hearing, let's say in Matopo, and one says, look, my children have no documentation, about 4 of them. By documentation, I mean issues to do with birth certificates. That's actually an enabler to access education in this country. So we really need to come up with best ways that particularly address that, and also engage the Registrar General's office to also ensure that the process of issuance of birth certificates is done at that very village and community level, without them going perhaps to the provincial office and facing so many hurdles. It also becomes ease of doing business, and that person feels also appreciated. And I mean, also whilst healing takes quite lots of time, we're aware of that. But we are saying also to the family, to the children, they're actually enabled to be full citizens of the country with voting rights, as well as they will also access particulars. But there are quite a lot of issues that also kick in. There are issues of economic welfare. There are issues of developmental issues as well, because livelihoods are also central in terms of peace building.
How do you measure how ready the communities are throughout the provinces to be able to be receptive of this attempt?
We have a department, the M&E department, that will also come up with community-based tools in terms of crafting those tools to ensure that these are the satisfaction indicators, and also engaging in terms of the tools in terms of measure, that they have to rather be smart and make sure that they also take the communities on board. So this is what we have done as a commission to ensure that all processes are actually what are community grounded.
Now, during your outreach programs in the provinces you're responsible for, Mat North, Mat South, and Bulawayo, issues were raised that concerned the public there, and these were issues on marginalization of the indigents of those provinces in spheres of employment opportunities, involvement, and fair representation in the national discourse, among other issues. Has the Commission addressed these concerns?
Christine, it's ongoing. You'll realize...
Ongoing, though it may be, some steps must have been made.
Yes, I'll then dovetail into the nitty-gritties. It's ongoing. Because I would say as a commission, firstly, the reason why we opened the Bulawayo office, the Bulawayo office, it was after we took on board the concerns that were coming from that constituency. And we felt as a commission that operating from Harare may be conflictual. In fact, it is conflictual to communities, perhaps in the Matebeleland, Midlands, and so on, because it's even cheaper for somebody from Midlands to actually jump onto a bus and go and make a report in the Bulawayo office, or somebody from Matebeleland North. But it's an issue of resources at the present moment. But had resources been permitting, we could have further decentralized to provinces. This is what we are looking at. Should we get resources and various partners also supporting us? And what we are focusing on right now is to ensure that at least the Bulawayo office has a reach to these communities. And we continue having an incremental approach in terms of the outreach processes. While at least we're in Bulawayo, we can reach out to Maswingo. It is the Bulawayo office does not only take care of only the Matebeleland provinces. And also as a commissioner, I'm also national in terms of outlook, but because of the challenge that we realized as a commission, we then found it important that I temporarily focus on that particular constituency. And of course, it is our wish also as we engage also central government that to enable us in terms of resources through the treasury to actually set up offices in the respective provinces, and God willing even in the respective districts, because we've established peace committees that are actually fitting into the commission framework and the planning processes. But I'll say perhaps addressing the question in terms of the Matebeleland region, I'll say we are doing quite a lot. You'll realize that we are engaging the respective ministers of state within that particular constituencies. whether it's issues of land, to ensure that, whether it's issues of food distribution, to say, look, food should not be distributed should be distributed in a non-partisan manner, to ensure that everyone benefits. And when it comes to issues of employment, and perhaps in Bulawayo, people will talk about the deindustrialization of Bulawayo and so on. So all these issues, we are ensuring that, look, locals should always be given a first preference in terms of employment opportunities. But you would also realize at the present moment is that employment opportunities have also dwindled.
Elsewhere, it's not just an isolated
It's
case.
not an isolated situation. So really we are in trying times economically, and in trying times there's also the blame game. But as a commission, we want to stand up and stand above partisan politics to say, look, let there be tolerance. And we always say, look, we have not also been favored with rains and worsening the prevailing situation. So you would realize that there are quite lots of initiatives in terms of partners that would engage, especially when it comes to food distribution processes, where such that when they are targeting communities, because I would say a hungry man is an angry man.
Of course.
So further qualified by the fact that we've undergone various epochs of conflict as a country, even right from pre-independence to post-independence. And those problems have become so structural, and it is important for us to address them in depth and in a very sustainable manner.
Now, of course, we can't discuss conflict in Matabeleland without making reference to Kukrahunde, which of course was a very sad situation to have happened and has been the biggest conversation for the commission in those areas. Of course, with your attempts with the need for healing, rehabilitation and reconciliation, Ukutula Trust helped to exhume the remains of two individuals, Justin Chuma and Tembingwenya, who died at the hands of 5th Brigade in Cholocho. Now, of course, this was an attempt at healing, right, which is a huge concern for a lot of people. But since then, has the commission been able to help facilitate more exhumations like that and reburials for the families of those who died during that time?
Christian, part of the exhumation process are very key and central to the work of the commission. But at this point in time, as a commission, we find it important that we should come up with a framework, a legal framework that will guide the process of exhumations. And this framework should have actually, should be broad-based and should actually take everyone on board. And during the exhumation processes, it actually requires qualified people, on which we know that Ukutula is actually qualified as an institution. They've got experts, but the role of the commission also comes in as central, and government should also partake in the process as well. So it is an issue of saying the commission will lead working with government and also other stakeholders. So we are developing that particular framework, and I can say that we are almost 90% through the process of developing the framework of the exhumations, because during the exhumation process, there are lots of other players that kick in. There is issue of counseling, there is the VSGD, and also experts in the exhumation process. And above all, we also do not want the exhumation processes to be a process that leads to further violence. But it should be a process that leads to closure. And we should accept that there is no country worldwide that has not gone through its dark past. But the dark past should then come in to make us reason and say it should be a never again, and we focus progressively with issues of healing, issues of rehabilitation, and issues quite of community reparations, because you will realize that at times it may be quite expansive to also focus on the issue of individual reparations, but we can also focus on issues of community reparations, to say, look, if you are going to Cholocho, this community does not have a clinic, and then we also recommend accordingly. But we are sensitive to the issues of Kukuraundi as a commission that have also been brought, and I strongly believe there is that kind of will. I think you've actually also seen His Excellency has actually been to Bulawayo quite a number of times, because we also need that political will and that kind of will in terms of actually addressing the issue. And we've seen that kind of robust engagement with the communities, where His Excellency has actually come interface with some of the communities, and having the various delegations also accompanying him, the Minister of Home Affairs, the Registrar, the Minister responsible for social welfare, because there are social welfare issues that kick in. While the process is actually being refined, because I would not want to speak on the basis of Matebele and Collective, because they are also an institution on their own. But we work hand in glove with them in terms of achieving this kind of healing to the communities.
Now, of course, you've mentioned that the government has been involved and made efforts to engage with people to let them know that, yes, they are working on it. But the Commission has been heavily criticized for how slowly the process is turning, and some feel that though the Commission has other concerns, Kukuraundi should be a priority. Would you comment on that?
Indeed, Kukuraundi stands as one of our key priorities, and it is an ongoing process. And what we would want to say is that our focus also as a commission is to actually reach out to the communities. This is what we have been doing, but people should also understand that you cannot fast track a peace building process. One of the mistakes that we've made in this country is that we fast tracked certain processes. And the issue, the net effect rather, has been much harm has been done. The process has to be taken steadily, and it has to be refined, and people input into that process. And to us, when it comes to the Kukuraundi issue, we deal directly with the affected families. We do not approach the issue in a blanket manner, because we're also professionals within that particular field. You would realize that one person may actually make so much noise, and perhaps the family perhaps did not even face the challenge. But there are quite lots of issues that are coming in. So what we want to say is that we are victim-centered as a commission, and we move towards that particular family, and this is why we're saying complaints should be brought to the commission. This is why we have set up offices. And then when we sit down and dissect accordingly, then we would actually come up with customized intervention. And to us as a commission, we would say there are lots of people who also want to take advantages of the process of what to push their certain agendas. No, we remain an independent commission in terms of saying we cannot run individual agendas. We sit down as a commission, make our own decisions without the influence of any partner. And this is the kind of independence that we have, and we do not run agendas for third parties or fourth parties. That is key to us as a commission. We do proper assessments, and we want to ensure that the intervention process does not do further harm to a fragmented society.
Now, of course, you've emphasized several times that your approach is victim-centered, and of course it's the victims that will need to be a point of healing. But would not that also apply for the obviously mentioned persons involved in the conflict? What approaches do you have to rehabilitate them?
Thank you. That is another sector that we also focus on. You'll realize that the perpetrator may also need serious healing and serious engagement. But we also sit down as a commission to say, look, how best, because peace building in Africa is a politically negotiated process, like it or not. You have to apply your faculties in a very, very sober manner as you move forward in terms of handling challenges. you should not be led by voices of people who are pushing certain agendas. It is important for a commission, because the commission is actually appointed into office for its integrity. And you have to apply your integrity in terms of the resolve of issues, and ensure that when resolving processes, you do not ignite new conflicts. To us, that is very, very important. And the engagement processes, this is why also in terms of the hearings that the commission is going to be doing, there are going to be public hearings and in-camera hearings. So I think that defines the elaborate process that the commission will be doing.
Now, you said as a commission you make recommendations for legislative framework to the government. Would you be able to highlight some of the framework that you have recommended to the government?
The issue of, let's say, documentation. We've engaged with the office, the highest office on the land, to ensure that the processes should be, once we kickstart the process of hearings and so on, that the birth certificate processes, the documentation processes should be done at that village level, such that the RIG's office actually supports us during that particular process. And we ensure that in terms of the constitutional provisions on the land, that each and every Zimbabwean has access to documentation. And you would realize that perhaps when people lose documents in Matapalala and at times, it has been a tedious process that you go to the registrar's office in Bulawayo, then you're told go to Harare. I mean, with the little means that people have, it also creates quite lots of conflicts. Those offices at provincial level should be in an ability to handle all sorts of challenges. And this is some of the issues that we are focusing on. And you also realize that on issues to do with artisanal wars that have been going on, and we've engaged the highest office on the land also to say, look, we are facing this kind of challenge and there is a need for political will. And I think you've realized that in the last few months, the incidences of those artisanal actually have subsided, and they've actually had broad-based engagements, even with the ZRP and so on, to ensure that they execute their duties without fear or favor. Because as a commission, we strongly believe that life is precious, and the law enforcement agents should actually safeguard accordingly.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Commissioner. Would you have any last remarks?
I think, well, to the generality of Zimbabweans who are saying, let's partner in the peace-building process. It is our responsibility as Zimbabweans to ensure that we cultivate a conducive environment for peace that will benefit the future generations to come. I thank you.
And now you've been watching State of the Nation, and we've been discussing this week the NPRC Visibility and Awareness Campaign. And today we were focusing on Healing, Rehabilitation and Reconciliation Thematic Committee with my guest today, Commissioner Leslie Ncebe. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Christian.
This broadcast was brought to you by Zimpapers TV Network. Be a part of the conversation via our Facebook page, Zimpapers TV Network, or via our Twitter handle @ZTN News. Thanks for watching.